Guys, what is happening to hip-hop just 2 days after J. Cole went in on Kendrick, no Diddy, saying that Kendrick's albums are trash, saying that he fell off. He is now backpedaling, and I'm not talking about his bike, all right? For what I think could be one of the first times in hip-hop history, he is apologizing for responding to Kendrick's diss. And honestly, I kind of respect it. But at the same time, I think it's a horrible move that could destroy his legacy. So let's kind of jump into this. Now, honestly, I didn't think he needed to jump out in the first place, because if you listen to Kendrick's initial diss, he was very clearly talking to Drake. There was a couple subs at Cole. You could tell he kind of kept it friendly with Cole. He was insulting Drake's legacy. He was saying he's going to outlive Drake. He was saying Drake's music is mid. If you really dissect the lyrics, he wasn't really using fighting words against J. Cole. So J. Cole had no business really jumping out in the first place, in my opinion. But for him to now apologize only 2 days later and say that he regrets this, it's not like J. Cole started this beef, right? And he regrets it. He just regrets participating in it. He got shot at and he shot back, but he regrets shooting back. I don't necessarily see the logic, but at the same time, if this was eating at J. Cole's conscience and he doesn't feel built for a rap battle like this, whether it's emotionally, whether it's he doesn't think he could compete, whatever the case is, if he doesn't feel like he's suitable for this type of battle, then I guess I respect him for, gracefully bowing out. However, for the last 5 years, J. Cole has been on a feature run, talking a lot of shit, saying that he could destroy any rapper in the game, saying that he's in his prime. If you go and listen to the album that he just dropped, there's probably 100 bars where he's talking about metaphorically killing your favorite rapper. Like, that's all he's talking about on this album. All I'm hearing in these bars is that he's in his prime, he's the GOAT right now, he can kill any rapper, your favorite rapper better watch out. Like, he's talking crazy aggressive. So it's not just on that Kendrick diss that he was trying to come for the crown. In my opinion, it kind of seems like he thought this diss would get a certain reaction, and it didn't. And part of that has made him kind of feel guilty about the whole thing and reflect on it and realize either A, Kendrick's my brother, I don't want to diss him, or B, maybe I just don't have what it takes to go up against a guy like that. Whether it's my sanity or my actual skill set, I don't think that I have the capacity right now to engage in something like this. But to go at Kendrick in the first place and then drop out of this beef so quickly, that kind of makes something clear to me that as much as I love J. Cole's music, he is not and has never been built to be the #1 person in hip-hop. Now, there's actually a couple reasons for this, so let's dive into them. It's unfortunate for J. Cole, right? Because J. Cole is an extremely talented rapper. J. Cole doesn't get his flowers, or only just started recently getting his flowers, in my opinion. I think he's deserved a lot more praise and a lot more success than he's had. And granted, he has had a lot of success, but obviously he's always been viewed as being in the third place of that big three, right? And I think this kind of gives his song Middle Child a whole new meaning. When he put that song out, he was just talking about being in the middle of two generations, like collaborating with the younger rappers like 21 Savage and Kodak, but then also, being at discussions with guys like Jay-Z and OGs of the game. But that song really kind of takes on a whole new meaning right now because J. Cole is like the middle child of the big three. If you're a middle child or a family with a middle child in it, like that middle child always gets overlooked. You always have the older brother who's more experienced, who has more independence, who has accomplished more. Then you got the younger brother who usually gets all the attention from the parents, usually gets spoiled the most, usually gets whatever he wants. Then you got the middle child who kind of gets overlooked a lot of the time and usually doesn't have anything too crazy that stands out about them. At least this is the stereotype of a middle child. Now, metaphorically, this kind of applies to J. Cole, right? Drake is like the big brother. Drake is like the guy who has the bigger catalog, who has the most amount of hits, who has been on top of the rap game for the longest amount of time out of the big three. Then you have Kendrick, who's kind of like the little brother, right? Because if you guys don't remember, Kendrick actually blew up after Cole and Drake blew up. So Kendrick's like that little brother who took the world by storm, who garnered all that attention, much more attention than Cole did, and became the poster boy of hip-hop, became the pinnacle, the peak of what hip-hop should be. He's like the young protege of hip-hop. Then J. Cole's like that middle child who is always consistent, who's always there, who's always active, who always puts up respectable numbers, doesn't do anything controversial, doesn't jump out the window doing anything crazy. Like, he's always just kind of there. So as a result, he kind of gets overlooked because you have guys like Drake who are more active and make more hits and kind of dabble in different styles. Then you got guys like Kendrick who are, from a technical standpoint, better MCs, who make conceptual albums that touch on more intense, more advanced subject matter. And then you got J. Cole in the middle of that who, he could put out a good hit here and there. He could put out amazing albums. He could put out thought-provoking music, but he just doesn't do the hit making as well as Drake. And he doesn't do the album curation or the technical rapping as well as Kendrick does. So he's really like that middle child stuck in between both of them. Now, I'm just saying all this because it's funny to me that he was the first one to come out and say anything, especially since he wasn't really attacked in all of this. And because he keeps claiming this is his prime, right? So it really did seem like he was ready to claim that #1 title. And the best way, or really the only way to do that, is to compete head-to-head, toe-to-toe against the other rapper who's considered #1, which would be Kendrick. He basically has admitted in the past that he's always kind of been in that third place to Kendrick and Drake in the viewpoint of the hip-hop audience. But now, in 2024, he's more active than Kendrick. He's putting out hits. He's putting out Grammy Award-winning music. He's putting out some of the best verses that he's penned in his entire career. He keeps telling you guys that he's in his prime right now. So as a result, he can't let someone like Kendrick come at him while he's in his prime and not say anything about it. So why I bring up the middle child thing is I think that J. Cole knows he's kind of been in that third place, in that, overlooked middle child position in hip-hop for the last, 10 years. And I think he's ready to come out of that. And I think he knows he's in his prime lyrically right now. And that's what gave J. Cole the confidence to go up against Kendrick. But I just think that Kendrick is such a hard target that J. Cole really had nothing to say against him. So he kind of made up all this stuff about Kendrick's music being trash and Kendrick falling off. And I don't think he genuinely believes that. And you could kind of tell from what he's saying in the song that he didn't really want to go at Kendrick crazy. And he didn't really have anything crazy to say. And at the end of the day, he probably didn't really believe the insults he was throwing at Kendrick. And that's why he's backtracking now. And for that reason, I just always think that he'll be that middle child of the big three. Between him, Kendrick, and Drake, he'll always be in third place. Because when it comes time to step up to the plate and prove himself as the GOAT, he's not doing it. And it's interesting to me because I think that this issue has been going on for a while, right? In 2011, J. Cole and Kendrick were supposed to put out a collaboration album. And that kept getting teased all the way until about 2015 when they both freestyled over each other's songs. And the public consensus was that Kendrick kind of washed J. Cole on that. And after that, we never heard them talk about doing a collaboration album ever again. And then it's also interesting that, these two seemed like they were pretty good friends and they actually respected each other outside of hip hop. But maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think we ever heard a song where they were both actually rapping together. Like we had Forbidden Fruit where Kendrick was on the hook. And it was ironic to me because that whole song, J. Cole was just talking about how he's the GOAT, but like you never gave Kendrick a chance to even, out-rap you or go toe-to-toe against you. So how are you calling yourself the GOAT, but you're letting this guy just sing on the hook? He's not even rapping. And then they also had a song called Under the Sun where Kendrick also was just on the hook and J. Cole was doing the rapping. So I don't think there's ever been a song where they've actually both spit verses, except for a Young Jeezy song where he asked Kendrick for a verse and J. Cole for a verse without telling each other that they were both on the same song together. But aside from that, we have no songs where these two guys are rapping together, except for a couple unreleased songs that they did back in like 2011. There's no released music from these two guys where they're both rapping on a track together. And I think this is intentional. I think this is because J. Cole never wanted smoke with Kendrick. Like, you gotta be very delusional to think you could out-rap a guy like Kendrick. I'm not trying to glaze him here, all right? No Diddy. I'm not trying to go overboard and really be like a delusional Kendrick stan. Like, I'm not even. Honestly, if you check my listening history, I probably listen to more J. Cole than I do Kendrick, just because there's so much more J. Cole material out there. But I'm saying from an objective standpoint, who is the better catalog? Who can actually get on a microphone and spit the craziest, most thought-provoking stuff that you've ever heard? Kendrick beats Cole in that every day. I'm sorry. It's pretty obvious. Now, like I said earlier, the one thing I think J. Cole has on Kendrick is the fact that he's been on an insane feature run in the last 5 years. And he also put out an amazing album in 2021. I do think the offseason was a better album than Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. But I don't know, man. Like, when Kendrick came back on that Future record, that sounded like hunger that I haven't heard from him in years. Like, I haven't heard something like that since the Control verse. And it sounds like he's ready to come back and really take the crown in hip-hop. He literally is telling you, like, there's no big three, it's just Big Me. He is ready to compete and be an active member of hip-hop. And I think whenever he is an active member of hip-hop, he's dropping consistently, he's on features, he's putting out projects and singles on a consistent basis. Whenever he's doing that, he is the top performer on a commercial level and from the eyes of the fans, right? Like, when he put out Damn in 2017, that was a higher selling album than any Drake or J. Cole album that year. He put out Good Kid, Mad City in 2012. That album is still getting more plays than any Drake or J. Cole album from that time period, 2011, 2013. Like, anytime Kendrick is active in hip-hop, he usually has the crown. He's the top rapper commercially and from a, critic's perspective. My point is that the hunger that Kendrick had on that Future record where he's dissing Drake and he's dissing J. Cole, we haven't heard that hunger from him in a long time. But the last time we did hear that hunger from him, or really any time you could tell that he's hungry and he wants to be number one, he becomes the biggest rapper in the game. We can't say the same for J. Cole. We can't even say that when J. Cole came back with that diss track that he's now apologizing for, we can't say that he had that same energy that Kendrick had on the Future record. He didn't come with that, I'm the GOAT, I'm number one type energy. He came with energy that really seemed like, listen, buddy, you're taking shots at me, so I got to say something back, but really, you're my boy, and I don't really want to be doing this. Like, that's the type of energy he came with. And that's not best rapper alive type energy. So as much as J. Cole wants to apologize for this or backtrack, that's great and all for his conscience. But just know that you probably can't be number one if you're not competing like you are number one. So from a legacy perspective, to me, this was a pretty big mistake, but he started making mistakes before he even apologized for the diss. Let me explain a little bit. Firstly, all of the disses that J. Cole is sending at Kendrick on this song, all of those insults and disses can be applied even more so to J. Cole. For example, he's saying that Kendrick Lamar's last album was tragic, his most recent album, which was Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. And he's saying that Kendrick Lamar fell off with that album. The first week sales of Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers were higher than the first week sales of half of J. Cole's albums. Just to put into perspective how Kendrick's quote-unquote tragic album is still outperforming more than half of J. Cole's entire catalog. He's also saying that Kendrick's second album put people to sleep even though they praised it. He's referring to Pimp a Butterfly here. That album was critically acclaimed. That album touched on social justice issues that, J. Cole has never really touched on in his entire career. And some of those songs have gone on to be the theme song of different protests and movements that have gone on in society over the last few years. So that album is a cultural staple. staple. So, even if you wanted to say it put people to sleep, the impact that it had is much greater than just a little bit of praise. That album was a generational movement. And beyond that, J. Cole used to be known as the guy who made sleepy music, NyQuil music. Like, go back and look at the memes from like 2016, 2017. Like, you had guys like Lil Pump and Smoke Perp and all these guys saying fuck J. Cole because he was known as that quote unquote boring rapper. Like, he was the poster child of sleepy music. So for him to come out and call someone else's music sleepy is crazy to me. And then the way he's kind of insulting Kendrick's catalog, he's basically saying, damn, Kendrick's third album was like his prime. But it's just weird to me hearing J. Cole coming at Kendrick for, not being commercial enough. That's basically what he's saying in this is that you don't drop enough albums, you're not active enough, and your prime was when you were very active and were making very mainstream music. Like, J. Cole seems like the antithesis, the exact opposite of that. He seems like someone who would appreciate rap that's more rooted in the core of hip hop, more rooted in the bars and the messaging and the lyrics, right? And less in the likability and the mainstream appeal of the music. So it's just weird to me hearing J. Cole insult Kendrick for not going back to making mainstream music and instead turning to something like Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, which was more introspective, which was more focused on mental health and less focused on, making hits like Damn was. Especially since J. Cole has done the same thing. So a lot of these disses that J. Cole is talking about, it seems like things that could be applied to him as well. He makes sleepy music. He also doesn't drop albums that frequently. He went through a whole phase from 2016 to 2018 where he literally has spoken about in interviews saying that he had writer's block back then. He didn't know what to drop. He was writing weak bars. If you go back and listen to the interview he did with Lil Yachty, J. Cole specifically stated that he was having writer's block back then and he literally had to take a break from hip hop because he thought everything he was writing was just whack. His music just wasn't good. So he literally had to stop making music. And now he's insulting Kendrick for doing the same thing. So it's just very weird to me. So I think the only respectable thing that Cole did throughout this entire debacle is jump out first and so quickly and be like, hey, I hear you dissing me. I'm not going to let this slide. Here's a warning shot. You want to engage in this beef? Like, I'm all here. I'm ready. It's like swatting a fly. Like, he was ready to compete. But the disses he was sending were just not true. He's calling Kendrick's music trash and sleepy when he makes worse music that puts even more people asleep. And ultimately, nothing he was saying was valid, and he had to backtrack 2 days later and say he regrets it. So not only does this put a stain on his legacy as the best rapper alive for the fact that he is refusing to compete in this battle, but just the mere fact that he came with a diss song that was full of insults that simply weren't true also kind of invalidates his credibility as being the GOAT. Because if you're really number one, you should have some sort of leverage on every other rapper in the game. But you obviously don't have any leverage on Kendrick because A, you couldn't compete with him. You had to back out of this beef. And B, even when you tried to compete with him, you sent disses at him that just weren't true. Honestly, guys, this is just sad to see. Like, with the feature run that J. Cole has been on in the last 5 years, I was really hoping that he would come take the crown as the best rapper alive. But these antics just show that he really can't compete when push comes to shove. And it's unfortunate. And I don't think it necessarily takes away from the quality of his music. I think that he, makes some of the best hip hop albums of the last 10, 20 years. But ultimately, when it comes down to being the best rapper alive, there's just certain things, certain qualities that he just doesn't embody. And for that reason, I think he'll always be that middle child stuck in between Drake, who can make more hits than him, and Kendrick, who can out-rap him. And that's okay. Ultimately, he has a great legacy to leave behind. But after the number of times he's teased his retirement, after this weak diss against Kendrick and then apologizing for it 2 days later, after, all this talk that he's had on all these features, saying he's the best, saying that every rapper should be scared of getting on a feature with him, and then reacting to this beef the way he did, I just don't think that he has the confidence to step up and take that crown as the best rapper alive. But ultimately, that's just my opinion. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. And regardless of what goes down with this whole beef, I'm just happy that we're getting features from guys like Kendrick. We're getting albums from guys like Cole. Hip hop is back. The GOATs are active, and we still haven't heard anything from Drake. So I think this is far from over, and it's only going to get more lit from here. So I'll catch you guys in the next one.